I had rehearsed my big arrival to the police academy about 100 times in my head. Walk in tall, look confident, toss my duffel bag on the bed of my assigned room, and greet my new roommate with the perfect handshake. Firm, but not too firm. I'd imagined it so clearly, I could almost hear the imaginary applause. Instead, reality was me hauling a duffel bag almost as big as myself down the dorm hallway. Sweat already running down my back even though it was late evening. My boots squeaked against the waxed floor, echoing loud enough to announce my rookie status to the entire building. Room 214. That's what the paper said. I stopped in front of the door, shifted the duffel on my shoulder, and tried to summon that mental image again. Calm, cool, professional. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room was neat to the point of intimidation. Bed corners tucked sharp enough to cut glass. Boots polished to mirror shine under the desk. A locker with labels so perfect they looked government-issued. I'd barely had time to think, wow, my roommate is a perfectionist, when a low voice behind me said, "You lost, rookie." I froze. The man standing in the doorway wasn't another wide-eyed recruit. He was taller, broader, and radiated the kind of authority that could make an entire classroom sit up straighter. His uniform shirt was rolled neatly at the sleeves, showing forearms that looked like they could bend steel bars. The only thing sharper than the crease in his pants was the stare fixed directly at me. I fumbled, adjusting my duffel. Room 214? He raised one eyebrow and stepped past me, tossing a folder onto the desk with practiced ease. Correct, unfortunately, but you're not rooming with another rookie. He pointed at the spare bunk, so neatly made it might have been waiting for a museum exhibit. That's yours. You're with me. For guidance. Guidance. He said it like a court sentence. I tried to play it cool, but my grip slipped and my duffel slid off my shoulder, crashing onto the floor with the kind of dramatic thud that echoed through the whole building. My face went red instantly. I scrambled to pick it up, muttering, "Yeah, great start." I hoisted it again only for the strap to snap halfway. Down it went a second time. This time, the senior officer actually smirked. "Impressive entrance," he said dryly. "Should I request backup for your luggage?" I muttered something between, "I've got it," and "please bury me alive," finally dragging the bag onto the mattress. He didn't offer to help. Instead, he strode to the desk, ripped a sticky note from a pad, scrawled something in block letters, and slapped it onto the front of my locker with a sharp smack. I leaned over to read it. "Curfew is not a suggestion." I blinked. Thanks." "Not a thank you note," he deadpanned. "A reminder. You'll need a lot of those." My instinct was to fire back something witty, but my brain came up blank. All I managed was a nod that probably looked more like a nervous tic. He sighed, clearly unimpressed. "Listen carefully, rookie. Lights out at 2200 sharp. Boots polished every night. Don't touch my coffee stash. Ever. And if you think those sheets of yours are made, you're wrong." I glanced at my bed. Wrinkled blanket, lopsided pillow, duffel still slumped like a body bag on top. "Noted. Good." He opened his locker with military precision, the hinges not daring to creak. "Now unpack and stay out of my way." The words were clipped, efficient, no wasted syllables. I scrambled to obey, pulling shirts and socks out like I was defusing a bomb. My awkward thanks slipped out anyway. "Appreciate the, hospitality." His answer was a grunt, followed by, "Don't make me regret it." By the time I'd finished half unpacking, the room was quiet again except for the sound of him flipping through a manual. His focus was absolute, his posture straight even sitting down. Next to that discipline, my messy pile of belongings looked like evidence of a crime. I decided to retreat before embarrassing myself further. "I'm just going to grab some water." He didn't even look up. "Don't get lost. It's a straight hallway, rookie." My ears burned. I turned toward the door, but the room was narrow, and as I stepped aside, so did he. For one instant, the space shrank to nothing. My shoulder brushed against his. It was barely a touch, the kind of accidental contact that should have meant nothing. But heat shot through me like I'd grabbed a live wire. I inhaled too quickly, gave myself away, and stepped back. He didn't move, just watched me for a heartbeat too long, then tilted his mouth in the faintest smirk. "Careful," he said, voice low. "You're in my way." I squeezed through the door before I could make it worse. My pulse was hammering so loud it drowned out the squeak of my boots on the hallway floor. So much for a confident arrival. My big academy debut had been duffel disasters, sticky note warnings, and one shoulder brush that left me more rattled than the weight of any training manual ever could. And the worst part? I was already looking forward to the next one. If there was one thing I learned quickly about sharing a room with him, it was this: he lived by the clock and I was the clock's natural enemy. The first morning, his alarm went off at exactly 5 a.m. Not 4:59, not 5:01. Exactly on the dot. He sat up instantly, like his body had been waiting for it. I, on the other hand, tried to smother myself with my pillow in protest. "Rise and shine, rookie." His voice was too steady, too awake, too unfair for that hour. I groaned. "Is murder legal before sunrise?" He stood, tugging his sheets tight enough to snap. "Against the law, actually. You should know that." That set the tone for our mornings. Him, all discipline and structure. Me, dragging my socks out of a tangled mess and trying not to trip over my own boots. The contrast was almost comical. One morning, he caught me stuffing crumpled socks into the drawer. "Chaos," he muttered, shaking his head. "If socks could be charged with disorderly conduct, yours would be serving life." "Don't worry," I shot back. "They're nonviolent offenders." He almost smiled, almost. The banter extended into the nights, too. By the second week, he'd made it his mission to point out that I snored. "Sounds like a busted engine," he told me one morning, sipping coffee with a soldier's patience. "Better than the sound of you grinding coffee beans at 4 in the morning like you're interrogating them," I replied. He just raised his mug. "That's discipline." I raised my pillow. "That's insanity." It should have been unbearable, but instead it became a rhythm. His exactness sharpened against my rough edges, and somehow it worked. Training days were worse. He was always nearby, watching with hawk-like precision, ready to point out every mistake I made during drills. First, I hated it, but then came the firing range. I stood stiffly, trying to aim, but my hands trembled just enough to betray my nerves. "Too tight," he said behind me. "I'm not." I started, but then he was there. His hand closed gently over mine, adjusting my grip on the pistol. His other hand rested against my shoulder, steadying me. "Relax here. Breathe through it." His voice was low, close enough that I felt the warmth of his breath at my ear. My skin lit up like it had been branded. My mouth went dry. I told myself it was just the stress of training, just nerves, just better, he murmured, sliding my finger into the correct position on the trigger guard. The shot went off cleaner, smoother. I hit closer to the center. He gave a small nod, satisfied, then stepped back. I exhaled, shaky, and tried to tell myself it was relief. But I knew better. The dorm showers were communal, lined with cheap mirrors that fogged in seconds. Every morning was a blur of steam, wet boots squeaking on tile, and the faint smell of soap and aftershave. We'd pass each other by the mirrors, towels slung low, shoulders damp and glistening. We never said anything about the way our eyes caught and lingered too long before darting away. "Need the mirror?" he'd ask, already halfway through tying his regulation-perfect knot. "No, you're good." I'd answer too fast, staring hard at my own reflection just to avoid his. It was a dance of almosts, silent, charged, and never spoken aloud. The real test came during inspection week. Uniforms had to be flawless. Ties straight, collars sharp, every inch screaming order. I was fumbling with mine, fingers clumsy, not coming out crooked for the third time. He sighed. "Step here." I hesitated, but moved closer. He reached for my tie, his fingers brushing my collarbone as he straightened the knot. "Too loose," he muttered, pulling the fabric snug. His knuckles brushed my throat. I swallowed hard, and it made the tie tighten under his grip. His eyes flicked up for just a second, meeting mine in the mirror. His hand lingered longer than necessary. The air between us felt dense, heavy, like the quiet before a storm. "There," he finally said, voice low, almost softer than usual. I panicked, blurting the first thing that came to mind. "Guess I should hire you as my personal stylist." He smirked, just enough for me to know he'd noticed everything. But he didn't comment. Instead, he smoothed the tie flat against my chest with one last brush of his fingers before stepping back. I exhaled slowly, trying to laugh it off, but the knot in my throat had nothing to do with the tie anymore. The room-clearing drill was supposed to be straightforward. Enter, sweep corners, call clear, don't shoot the hostage dummy. Easy on paper. In reality, my nerves turned it into a disaster reel. I burst through the door too fast, almost tripped on the threshold, forgot the left corner, and shouted "Clear!" right before putting 2 rounds in the cardboard hostage's chest. The silence afterward was deafening. Then his voice, sharp as a whip. "What part of don't shoot the hostage did you not understand, rookie?" The other recruits snickered. My face burned so hot I could have boiled water. He didn't give me time to recover. Again, and do it right this time. I stumbled through a second run, better but still sloppy. He barked corrections, clipped and merciless. By the end, I wanted to melt into the floor. That night, I sat on my bunk replaying every mistake, my pride crushed flat. When the door creaked, I expected another lecture. Instead, he walked in holding an ice pack. "Here." He tossed it at me. I fumbled but caught it. "Your shoulder." You slammed into the doorframe like it owed you money. I pressed it against the sore spot. "Thanks," I muttered. He sat on the opposite bunk, leaning back like he owned the whole room. For a while, we sat in silence, the low desk lamp throwing gold shadows across the floor. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "You're too eager. You think speed wins. It doesn't. Control does." I nodded. "Yeah, guess I wanted to impress you." The words slipped out before I could stop them. He tilted his head, studying me. "You don't need to impress me. You need to survive. That's the difference." It wasn't said cruelly. It was grounding, like he was speaking from a place I didn't know yet. Later, the ice pack melted into a puddle on my desk, and the room settled into that strange calm you only get late at night. He was flipping through a book, and I finally asked, "You ever screw up when you were new?" His lips twitched. "Once. Just once. I shot the wrong target during a drill." I perked up. "You? Really?" He nodded. "Yeah." Put a round straight through the sergeant's clipboard. He was not impressed. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the bunk. "No way. You?" He smiled, small, reluctant, but real. "Don't get used to it." The laughter eased something between us. He leaned back, arms crossed, and said, "Rookie, don't tell anyone I said this, but I hate storms. Can't sleep when they roll in." I blinked. That felt like more than just small talk. "Why?" "Family thing." His voice softened. "My old man used to slam doors when he was drinking. Sounded like thunder. After a while, storms just felt the same." The room fell quiet. I shifted, ice forgotten on the desk. My dad never slammed doors. He just walked out. One day he was there, then he wasn't. Guess that's worse than thunder. He looked at me, and for a second, the hard edges of his face eased. "Yeah, guess we both grew up with noise." The next morning, I found a surprise in the fridge. He'd labeled every shelf like a crime scene diagram. Top shelf, officer only. Do not touch. Second shelf, reserved. Bottom shelf, civilian chaos. "That's you." I snorted so hard I almost choked. Naturally, I stole one of his yogurts and left a sticky note on the empty space. Confession, rookie did it. Consider this evidence. That evening, he opened the fridge, saw the note, and closed the door slowly. Then he looked at me across the room. "You've signed your own warrant. Guess I'll need a good lawyer," I said, grinning. He shook his head, but the corner of his mouth betrayed him. Humor, actual humor. That night, Training left me with a sprained wrist from hitting the mat too hard during takedown practice. I tried to hide it, flexing my hand under the desk. Of course, he noticed. "Let me see," he said, not a question. "I'm fine." He didn't budge. "Now, rookie." Reluctantly, I offered my wrist. He grabbed the med kit from under his bunk and sat beside me. His fingers were sure and steady as he wrapped the tape, each pull snug but not painful. "You always have to be the tough guy?" he asked quietly. I shrugged, trying to act casual, though my pulse was anything but. "Part of the job, right? Part of the job is knowing when to let someone help." His tone was gentle, almost too gentle. The closeness of him, the way his breath brushed my cheek when he leaned in to tear the tape. Every nerve in me buzzed. When he tied off the last strip, his hand lingered for a heartbeat. My knees brushed against his, and neither of us moved. It wasn't much. Just 2 sets of legs on the edge of a bunk, knees touching like it was an accident. But it felt like everything. We both pretended it was nothing. He leaned back, clearing his throat. "There. Don't mess it up again." I nodded quickly, staring at the taped wrist like it was suddenly fascinating. But long after the lights went out, I could still feel the ghost of his fingers on my skin, and the warmth of that fleeting touch where our knees had met. The academy had a way of turning everything into homework. Procedures, codes, endless forms that had to be memorized word for word. That night, we were both stuck with a late assignment, pages of tactical response protocol that blurred into gibberish by the 3rd read-through. The power flickered once, then again, before cutting down to a stubborn glow from the tiny desk lamp. The room looked smaller in that half-light, shadows pressing in at the edges. He sat on the chair. I perched on the edge of the desk, shoulders nearly touching, sharing the same binder of notes. Our voices were low, steady at first, reciting back and forth. "Step 1, he asked. "Secure perimeter," I answered, tapping the page with my pen. "Step 2, call in backup. Step 3, contain." My eyes lost the line. His finger slid in, pointing to the exact spot. I looked up, and suddenly he was closer than I expected. Too close. The silence between us stretched. His profile was all sharp lines in the lamp glow, jaw tight, lips set, eyes shadowed but fixed. I swallowed, forcing myself back to the page. We both reached for it at the same time. My hand landed over his. I froze. So did he. Our fingers didn't move, not right away. My pulse hammered in my ears, louder than the storm still grumbling outside. His hand was warm, steady under mine, but there was tension in the way he held it still, as if letting go would mean admitting something neither of us wanted to say. Slowly, I lifted my eyes. His gaze met mine, steady but unguarded, like I'd caught him in the one moment his walls slipped. We leaned closer, not planned, not thought out, just gravity pulling us together. My breath caught. His lips parted like he was about to say something, or maybe like he wasn't going to say anything at all. The knock shattered it. 3 sharp raps on the door. We both jerked back. The binder nearly slid off the desk. I scrambled upright, and he stood so fast the chair legs screeched against the floor. "Occupied," he called out, his voice flat, controlled. The hallway went quiet. Whoever it was left. Inside, though, the silence was unbearable. He kept his back to me, pretending to shuffle the pages into order, but the tips of his ears were red. I sat frozen, trying to breathe like a normal human being and failing. We hadn't kissed. Not really. But my lungs didn't know the difference. Every breath came too sharp, too shallow, like I just run laps. He cleared his throat, still not looking at me. "You should review the firearms maintenance checklist," he said, as if nothing had happened. "You'll need it for inspection." I nodded, though I couldn't have repeated a single word if my life depended on it. My focus was shot to hell. "Right?" I muttered. "Firearms maintenance. Got it." I picked up my pen, but my hand still tingled where it had touched his. We didn't talk about it. Not the hands, not the way we'd leaned in like it was inevitable. Instead, I stared at diagrams of rifle components, pretending to care about springs and bolts, while every part of me replayed that half-second over and over again. The closeness, the silence, the way he hadn't pulled away until the knock came. I didn't know if it was relief or disappointment that sat heavy in my chest. Maybe both. But one thing was certain. From that night on, no amount of firearms maintenance could stop my thoughts from drifting back to what almost happened, and what might still happen, if the wrong knock didn't come at the wrong time. Night duty was supposed to be boring. Walk the perimeter, check the gates, log the times, stay awake until your eyelids burned. Most rookies hated it. But that night, when I saw my name paired with his on the rotation, I felt something completely different. A mix of nerves and anticipation I didn't want to analyze too closely. The compound was quiet, lit by a few scattered lamps that made the shadows stretch long across the pavement. Our boots crunched in rhythm, the sound louder than it should have been in the stillness. He walked steady beside me, hands in his pockets, gaze sharp on the fences. After a while, he broke the silence. "Rookie, if you pass your quals, you owe me a cup of real coffee. Not that instant powder you call fuel." I smirked. "Confident, aren't you? What if I don't pass?" "Then I'll still expect the coffee," he said flatly, though the corner of his mouth tugged like he was suppressing a grin. "Failure shouldn't mean I have to suffer instant." I rolled my eyes, but the joke eased something in my chest. For a little while we just walked. The air smelled faintly of cut grass, the night humming with crickets beyond the fences. Eventually, the silence stretched too long, and the weight of my thoughts pressed out. "You ever feel like you're not cut out for this?" His head turned toward me, sharp in profile under the lamplight. "Why?" I shrugged, kicking a loose stone along the path. "I mess up. I'm slow. I choke under pressure. Half the time I feel like they're all waiting for me to wash out." He was quiet for a beat. Then, softer than I expected, he said, "I've felt that. More than once." That startled me. "You?" He nodded. "Not because of drills or tests. Because of people. I worry about caring too much. That it'll get someone hurt. Or me." The words hit deeper than I was ready for. We kept walking, but my chest felt tight. It wasn't just about the academy anymore. It was about something unspoken, something heavier hanging between us. I swallowed hard. "Is that what this is, then? You care too much?" He stopped walking. The night seemed to still with him. He turned, searching my face in the dim glow. "Maybe, but I won't cross a line you don't draw." The firmness in his voice wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Consent wasn't just implied. It was spoken plain and clear. My heart hammered. "So, if I drew that line closer?" His jaw tightened, like he was fighting himself. "Then I'd follow. But only if you wanted it. Equal say. No pressure." We ended up near the windowed break room, light spilling faintly onto the gravel. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching me with an intensity that made my skin buzz. I stepped closer. My voice was barely steady. "I think I do want that. The line closer." For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then, slowly, carefully, he tilted forward. Our faces were close enough that I felt his breath against my cheek. He hesitated, giving me space to change my mind. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I didn't step back. His lips brushed mine, light, brief, trembling. A question more than a kiss. I exhaled into it, the answer clear. When he pulled back, his eyes searched mine. "You sure?" His voice was low, careful. I didn't even have to think. "Yes." Relief flickered across his features. He smiled, small but unguarded. We didn't move to deepen it, didn't rush into something we couldn't take back. Instead, we stayed close, smiling like idiots who'd just stolen a secret from the night itself. The rest of the shift blurred. We still walked the perimeter, still checked the gates, still logged the hours. But every glance carried new electricity. Every brush of our shoulders buzzed like static. Neither of us said the word kiss again. But we didn't need to. It lived between us, a quiet truth stitched into the dark. By the time dawn stretched pink across the horizon, I knew two things for certain. I owed him a real cup of coffee. I was in far deeper than I'd planned. And for once, the thought didn't scare me. The storm rolled in fast, swallowing the horizon with bruised clouds. By evening, the wind rattled the windows, rain lashing in sheets against the glass. The academy's hallways buzzed with nervous chatter. Rookies trying to act tough, pretending thunder wasn't shaking the building itself. By the time lights flickered once, twice, and finally cut out, our dorm was swallowed in shadow. Only the patter of rain and the occasional crack of thunder filled the silence. I glanced across the room. He was sitting rigid on his bunk, shoulders tense, eyes locked on the window. The flashlight beam on his desk lay forgotten, pointing into the ceiling. I remembered what he'd told me, the storms, the memories they dragged up, doors slamming, noise too close to fear. I hesitated, then said softly, "Hey, we don't have to do this alone." His eyes flicked toward me, unreadable in the dim glow. For a moment I thought he'd brush it off. Then he stood, crossed the room, and without a word shoved my bunk up against his. The metal frames groaned but held. "Better?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quietly. We sat across from each other in the middle space between the beds. The flashlight glow painted us in gold and shadow. Outside, thunder cracked like a whip. Inside, the tension stretched taut, but not the bad kind. "You look like you're waiting for me to crack a joke," I murmured. His mouth curved faintly. "You usually do." I shrugged. "Gotta keep morale up. It's in the rookie handbook." That earned me a soft chuckle. It was enough to ease us closer, our knees brushing in the narrow space. Neither of us pulled away this time. Minutes slipped by. Rain drummed hard on the roof, steady as a heartbeat. Our voices dropped lower. "This storm," he admitted, staring at the window. "It's worse at night. Always has been." "You're not alone now," I said, the words out before I could stop them. He turned toward me, searching my face like he wanted to believe it. The glow caught his eyes, and for a moment, everything else faded. The thunder, the storm, the academy, the rules. We leaned in, not like before, hesitant and trembling. This time it was slow, certain. The kiss was soft at first, a test, then warmer as he pressed closer. His hand cupped the side of my face, rough thumb brushing along my cheek. I broke just enough to whisper, "Okay." His answer was a nod, breath against my lips. "Okay. You?" "Yes." It deepened from there, steady and unhurried. Shirts tugged loose, breath shared between kisses. Every move came with a pause, a glance, a whispered check-in. "You sure?" "Yes." "Still okay?" "Still yes." It wasn't rushed, wasn't desperate. It was careful, reverent. I felt the weight of him, the warmth, the steady strength that had seemed so untouchable in daylight now softening under my hands. The storm outside raged, but in that small strip of space between bunks, it felt like the world had narrowed to just us. Just this. Our fingers laced together, grip tightening with every whispered yes. The flashlight beam tipped, rolling against the wall, but neither of us noticed. We faded to black with laughter caught in breath, with murmured promises, with the kind of closeness that didn't need explaining. When it was over, when the storm had eased into steady rain, we lay tangled under one blanket. His chest rose and fell beside me, slow and even now. I traced the faint scar on his forearm with my fingertip. He didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled me closer, tucking my head beneath his chin. For a long while we just listened, to the rain on the roof, the distant roll of thunder, the silence of a world that didn't have to know what had just happened between us. He whispered something I almost didn't catch. "Didn't think I'd ever let someone this close again." I smiled against him. "Guess you didn't have much choice. I'm stubborn." His laugh rumbled soft against my ear. "You don't say." The storm outside eventually passed, but inside we stayed exactly where we were. Two bunks pushed together, one blanket, one choice made in the dark. Morning light crept into the room like it knew a secret. The storm had cleared, leaving the world washed clean. But inside the dorm, everything felt new in a way that made my stomach twist with both nerves and something warmer. I woke first, blinking against the pale glow. He was beside me, half asleep, one arm draped across my waist as if it had been there forever. For a moment, I just lay there, listening to his steady breathing, wondering if I was allowed to be this close to someone who had barked at me in drills the day before. When he stirred, he didn't let go immediately. Instead, he blinked, glanced at me, then quietly shifted away, careful, like he wasn't sure what came next. "Water?" he asked, already reaching for the bottle on his desk. His voice was rough with sleep. "Yeah," I croaked, throat dry. He handed it over, then tossed a clean towel onto my bunk without a word. Practical, efficient. Still, the gesture said more than anything. I sat up, towel in my lap, heart pounding like we'd done something scandalous. Which, in a way, we had. "Guess I should make peace offerings," I muttered, stumbling toward the kettle and the instant coffee jar. The result was exactly as awful as expected. Bitter, watery, barely drinkable. I shoved a mug toward him anyway. "For the record, this is your fault. You demanded coffee if I passed quals." He lifted the mug, sniffed, and smirked. "Rookie, if this is what passing tastes like, I'd rather fail." I shoved his shoulder, but the banter settled the awkwardness, like slipping back into familiar boots. Still, the weight of what we'd done lingered, unsaid, until he finally leaned back in his chair and broke the silence. "We need to talk about last night." My stomach dropped, but I nodded. "Yeah, rules, right? Rank first." His tone was steady, professional, but softer than usual. "I'm your senior officer here. That can't change until graduation. No favoritism, no cutting corners. If anything, I'll be harder on you in drills." I winced. "So nothing changes?" His eyes flicked to mine. "Not where it matters. Not where someone could get hurt." I nodded slowly. "Okay, agreed. We keep it private. At least until graduation." He sipped the terrible coffee, grimacing. "And we protect each other's careers. No distractions when it counts. Safety first, always." It wasn't romantic, not in the way movies promised. But it was honest. And it mattered more. "Got it," I said. "Deal." For the first time that morning, his shoulders eased. We moved on to more ordinary business like the art of bed-making. I decided to prove I could do a proper military tuck, even if I hadn't managed it once during inspection week. He stood over me, arms crossed, expression grave as I yanked corners and smoothed blankets until my hands ached. I stepped back, sweating. "Well?" He leaned down, pinched the edge, and it came loose instantly. C-, he declared. I gawked. C-? That's brutal grading. Generous grading, he corrected. Then, unexpectedly, he leaned in and pressed a brief kiss to my forehead. Extra credit. Heat rushed to my face. "You're impossible," I muttered, grinning despite myself. By the time breakfast rolled around, we were moving like roommates again. Awkward roommates with a massive secret. The toaster on the counter popped loudly, breaking the quiet. I buttered the toast badly, crumbs scattering everywhere. He shook his head like I was committing a crime scene. "Don't look at me like that," I said. "Toast is toast. Not when you massacre it like that." I shoved a slice into his hand anyway. "Eat, or I'm reporting you for insubordination." He smirked, then leaned in as if to argue. Instead, his lips brushed mine. Gentle, unhurried, more affection than heat. Just a touch of warmth that made my chest ache in the best way. The toaster dinged again, almost comically loud. We pulled back, both laughing under our breath. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't fireworks. But as we sat with burnt toast and bad coffee, pretending the world outside hadn't changed, I realized it didn't need to be. The rules were clear. The boundaries were set. And beneath them all, something new and undeniable had taken root. Something that made me smile like a fool, even over breakfast. Quals came down to one final drill, room clearing hostage scenario. The same one I'd botched weeks ago. My palms sweated inside my gloves, but this time I slowed my breathing, remembered his words. Control, not speed. I moved steady. Corners cleared, calls made. The hostage dummy remained intact, The cardboard threats dropped one by one. When it was over, the sergeant gave a curt nod. Pass. Applause rose from the line of rookies waiting their turn. I barely heard it. My eyes searched the back of the room where he stood, arms crossed, expression unreadable to everyone else. To me, though, it wasn't blank. It was bright. His gaze locked on mine for the briefest second, pride glinting there like sunlight through glass. The ceremony itself blurred. Speeches, salutes, handshakes. My uniform felt stiff, my smile fixed for the endless photos. Through it all, I felt his presence like a steady anchor in the crowd. When it ended, people drifted toward families waiting outside the hall. I slipped away toward the back exit, my chest pounding with expectation. He was there already, leaning against the wall, cap tucked under his arm. "Congratulations," he said simply. "Thanks. You looked terrifyingly serious back there." "Had to. Couldn't have people thinking I was rooting for you." His mouth quirked, just enough to undo the seriousness. We walked together, silent until the buzz of the crowd was far behind us. Then, almost casually, he said, "I put in for a transfer." I stumbled. "Wait, what?" "So we're not in the same chain of command anymore. Cleaner that way." The weight of what that meant hit me like fresh air after a locked room. "You did that for me?" "For us," he corrected. His voice was steady, but the way his fingers tightened around his cap gave him away. We ended up at a small diner on the edge of town, the kind with sticky menus and a bell over the door. The waitress barely looked at us, just poured coffee and scribbled orders. It was perfect, anonymous, quiet, away from everything else. We talked about nothing at first. Food, the storm, how terrible my coffee still was. He teased me about almost tripping on stage when I got my certificate. I called him out for polishing his boots twice that morning. Then, without ceremony, he reached into his pocket and slid something across the table. A small silver key. I stared. "What's this?" "My place. Off base." His gaze didn't waver. No more sleeping alone. For a moment, the noise of the diner, the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, faded to nothing. Just his words and the key and the quiet certainty in his eyes. I picked it up, the cool metal heavy in my palm. "You're serious." "As serious as I've ever been." My throat tightened, but I smiled anyway. "Guess I better get used to making beds the right way." He smirked. C- won't cut it anymore. That night, his apartment felt different from the dorms. Quieter, warmer, the kind of place that smelled faintly of coffee grounds and soap instead of disinfectant and regulation uniforms. He dropped his cap on the counter, hung his jacket on the hook by the door. I stood there awkwardly, holding my duffel like it was my first day all over again. He took it from me and set it down. "Relax. You're not a rookie here." I laughed softly, nerves still buzzing. "Feels like it." The bedroom was simple, clean sheets, dresser, one bed, 2 pillows. I set my spare uniform on the hook beside his. The sight of them hanging side by side hit me harder than any kiss. I laughed, shaky but real. "Look at that. Evidence." He came up behind me, close enough that his chest brushed my back. "Evidence of what?" "That I belong here," I said before I could stop myself. He didn't argue. The final intimacy wasn't urgent. No storm, no blackout, no rush. Just steady warmth. We moved together like we'd been waiting for this space, this freedom, this chance to simply be. Later, curled under the same blanket, our laughter still hanging in the air, I stared at the porch light glowing faintly through the window. The skies had cleared, stars breaking through in patches. His arm rested heavy around me, steady, safe. 2 pillows, I whispered, half asleep. "Yeah, better than one." He pressed his lips to my temple. "Much better." The world outside kept turning. But inside that small apartment, under the glow of a porch light, it finally felt like we'd made a choice, and it was ours to keep. What did you feel most in this story? The nervous tension of almost crossing the line, or the quiet relief when they finally chose each other? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more powerful love stories that prove connection can bloom anywhere.